everyone, Mrs. Ortega here. We are going to take a look today at Chapter 9. In Chapter 9, we're going to look at nutrition and digestion. So our digestive system is what we'll focus on, but we'll look at some other subtopics as well. And so many of you are familiar with nutrition, digestion aspects, and so this tends to be a little bit more of an exciting chapter as we look at things that will directly affect our daily lives. And so this chapter introduces this concept from an American viewpoint that more than 1/3 of American adults are obese. The obesity epidemic, combined with our sedentary, non-mobile jobs and inactive lifestyles, have contributed to higher incidences of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and other weight-related health issues. And so here it shows you there are more than 300,000 deaths per year in the United States alone that attribute to weight-related issues. And so that is a large percent and is it has affected the United States greatly. And so not only is there a need for a reliable method to shed or lose that weight, there are only about 5% of dieters are able to reach their goal weight and maintain it for a long term. And so even once you reach that goal, it's hard and very unlikely that you maintain that weight long term wise. And so with a lot of diets and diet recommendations out there, it can be difficult to evaluate not only their soundness, but their ability to help you losing or help someone lose weight. And so these topics are very important in terms of not only our health, but understanding nutrition and digestion. And so we're going to learn about both in this chapter. And so here are some big ideas: obtaining and processing food, the human digestive system, and nutrition. And so in this video today, we're going to look at two of these, and that will be obtaining and processing food and nutrition. And so in the next video, we'll do the human digestive system, which is a large percent of this chapter. So let's start off with obtaining and processing food. And so let's see that there are three main kinds of diets. They're very familiar to most people already, and those are herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. So herbivores are known for eating plant and plant material. Some examples listed here are cattle, gorillas, sea urchins, and snails. They're all animals that will only eat plants. And then you have carnivores that only eat other animals for their meat, and those include lions, owls, whales, and spiders. And then omnivores will eat both plants and other animals. And so some examples here are humans, roaches, raccoons, and crows. And so these are the three main types of diets, these are things you'll want to know, along with how they obtain their food. There are four main ways, and so these are usually not as well known, but are very important to understanding how animals obtain their food. The first one is suspension feeders. We saw suspension feeders in several organisms in the previous chapters. Like sponges, they will capture food particles from the surrounding medium, which is usually water. They're usually in an aqueous environment. Suspension feeders will filter that water for food. Then we have substrate feeders that live in or on their food source, and they eat their way through it. Fluid feeders will suck in nutrient-rich fluid. So this is a liquid they will take from a host. And then the last one here is the biggest group. Bulk feeders will ingest large pieces of food. And so we have some examples of those. Here, the first one, the top left image, is a manta ray, and this will use this wide mouth that you see there to strain food from the seawater. And so this is a suspension feeder. It's going to filter that water for food particles. The substrate feeder is next. An example is this caterpillar, as it's living on its food source, which is a leaf, and it's eating its way through the leaf, leaving a nice trail of feces behind. And so this is a substrate feeder that will live and eat its way through its food source. Another example of a substrate feeder would be the earthworm, as it lives in its food source of dirt, and it's going to eat its way through it. The next one is a fluid feeder. On the top left here, you can see the mosquito injecting its appendage there, and it's going to suck that blood from the human host. Only female mosquitoes will feed on blood from other animals. The males actually feed off of pollen. And the next one here is the bulk feeder, which is what we are classified as. A bulk feeder will ingest large particles of food. You see this heron is going to swallow that fish. So our checkpoint question says, red pandas munch large quantities of bamboo, but also eat mammals, bird, eggs, and berries. Name their diet category. So this would be either herbivore, carnivore, or omnivore, and then type of feeding mechanism, which we just saw. And so it would be an omnivore, as it eats both plant and animals. And it's a bulk feeder. It's going to ingest large pieces of food. And so the overall food processing is divided into 4 stages. Those stages are ingestion, digestion, absorption, and elimination. And they sound very easy, but people do confuse them. And so let's take a look at that, how that applies to this scenario of this kitten here eating its food. So ingestion is first taking in the food, usually through mouth that will have teeth that will grind that food, start to grind that food up. Which is the second part. Digestion is going to take those big pieces of food and break them into tiny molecules that can be absorbed by the body. So when you can think of it as in when we eat a sirloin steak, that steak is not going to automatically become part of our skeletal muscle. We need to break it down to the smallest molecules in order to use it. And so we don't just incorporate some steak tissue into our skeletal muscle. So digestion is breaking that food down. The absorption is absorbing those small molecule nutrients throughout all the body cells. And then the last stage is elimination, which is getting rid of undigested or waste material. And so there's different types of digestion that are noted here as well. Mechanical digestion is a physical breaking apart of pieces of food, or breaking apart of that food. Chemical digestion is where those molecules are broken up into tiny pieces. And so here, going back just for a second, the chemical digestion, which is written here, is very necessary because animals, we cannot use those proteins, those carbs, fats, and nucleic acids directly. We need to break them down to the smallest molecules. That way we can use them to build other things. And so it's like breaking down to use the tiniest little pieces. That way we can make new things. And so how do those things break down, you may ask? And so that's what we'll see next. So for the different types of food molecules, we have 4 main types. First is protein. Through enzymes breaking them apart, the protein will be broken down into amino acids to use. For carbohydrates, they're going to have either polysaccharides or disaccharides, or broken down into monosaccharides. These are single sugars, or simple sugars. that then can be reused for anything, for sugar-wise. And then for nucleic acids, like the DNA, RNA in the cells that we eat, those are broken apart into nucleotides, so we can use them for our own DNA of our own cells. RNA and other things like that in our own cells. Then lastly, fat. Fat molecules are broken down to their the glycerol and then the fatty acid tails. And so those can be rebuilt into new fats to be stored or used for metabolic reasons. And so how does that digestion occur, you may ask? And so we've seen this a few times in other chapters. We'll briefly take a look at it again. Sponges and protists, they will digest their food in small vacuoles. And so the cell will absorb a liquid-ish amount surrounding the food and then bring it into the cell and break it apart. But other animals will use compartments. And so we've seen in the cnidarians and flatworms, they have a gastrovascular cavity with a single opening to gather and then expel food and waste. But most animals will have what we call a alimentary canal that's going to run from the mouth to the anus with different regions or organs along the way that will digest and absorb the nutrients from the food. And so we'll look at the human digestive system and the alimentary canal in the next video, but until then we do have some examples of these different gastrovascular cavity and alimentary canal. So here's our gastrovascular cavity with our hydra. So you can see this hydra has swallowed a piece of food, and so now the food is going to be broken down by the enzymes that are released. So first step is swallowing the food, not listed here, and then releasing enzymes to break the food apart. Then the food is broken apart by those enzymes and engulfed by the cell, which is a vacuole, so it's forming a vacuole and bringing that food in, and it's going to digest that into smallest particles to be used by the cell and spread about. And so that's for the gastrovascular cavity. And so now let's take a look at some examples of alimentary canals for most animals. First one is the earthworm here, where the mouth will bring in food, or is the opening that then the pharynx will bring in the food. The esophagus connects the pharynx to the crop, which temporarily stores food. Then the gizzard, following it, will grind that food up into small bits, and then the rest there you see is the intestine, which will be responsible in absorbing the nutrients. And then lastly, waste will leave out the anus. So complete system from mouth to anus is the alimentary canal. Looking at the grasshopper here, we do have a mouth that will bring food in through the esophagus to the crop that temporarily stores it. Gastric pouches will release enzymes to break apart the food in the midgut. Then the hindgut, the midgut will also absorb the nutrients, and then the hindgut will form waste that will leave through the anus. And lastly for the bird, again the mouth will take in the food that will go through the esophagus to the crop where it's temporarily stored. Birds can actually take that food from the crop and signal it to go back to the mouth for further chewing, and then it will go to the stomach where it's broken up. Big bits are broken up, and then the gizzard, those medium-sized bits are broken up into tiny pieces. Then the intestine absorbs the nutrients, and then they do not store their waste. It will leave immediately through the anus. And so those wrap up our examples. And so this next slide goes into the human digestive system. So we will skip all the way down for now to our nutrition, which is the next topic that we'll cover in this video today. So nutrition, first you want to understand how do we measure nutrients. And so the way that we measure chemical energy is in kilocalories. And so 1 kilocalorie equals 1,000 calories in chemistry. When we look at heat and temperature and different principles of different molecules, a calorie is going to be a unit of energy. And so for our diet, it's actually every calorie is actually a kilocalorie, which is 1,000 chemical calories. And so it's a lot of material that's needed for biosynthesis, so making large molecules and essential nutrients. And so another way we will measure is through rate. And so metabolic rate is going to be the amount of energy that we consume in a day. And so this includes what we call the basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of energy just needed to survive throughout the day in order to maintain normal functioning, and then plus the energy needed for other activities. And so the metabolic rate is the sum of the activity energy and the basal metabolic rate. And so you can also see here a metabolic rate is the total energy used for all activities of a unit of time, whereas basal metabolic rate is the minimum number of calories that a resting animal needs to maintain life. And so to calculate your metabolic rate, you'll want to take the basal metabolic rate and add energy used for daily activities. And so to help you understand how many calories needed for common activities, we have this chart here that looks like starting with reading all the way to jumping rope. You can consume a different number of calories, burn a number of calories in 30 minutes time based on the different activities. And then also on the top there you can see calories consumed per item there. And so you want to balance the amount that you consume with the amount that you use, and try not to overconsume and underuse in terms of spending those calories. And so we also measure nutrition in terms of what nutrients do we need. And so there's a group of nutrients called essential nutrients, are substances that we require, or animals require, but we cannot make them internally. We cannot make them in ourselves. And so we have to obtain them from the environment. And so in essential nutrients, there are essential fatty acids. And so these fatty acids, like linoleic acid, are used to make phospholipids of cell membranes. And so they're very, very important to making our cells, and we need those in our diets. That way we can make those new cells. And so they're always found in seeds, grains, and vegetables. And so we're never usually low on essential fatty acids in our bodies. Usually, if anything, there are certain acids or fatty acids that we don't consume based on dietary preferences. For those that do not like seafood or fish, they might be a little low on omega-3 fatty acids, but there are certain plant materials that will have some in small amounts. And so you can obtain them from your diet, or you can supplement your diet with vitamins or other supplements that will get you those essential nutrients. You can also have essential amino acids. These are needed to make proteins. Proteins do a very wide array of functions in his cells, so they're very, very essential. They're found in meats, egg, milk, and cheese, so meat and dairy products, but they can be found in plants as well. And so if you look at our essential amino acids, they're listed here. Methionine, valine, histidine, threonine, phenylalanine, leucine, isoleucine, tryptophan, and lysine. And all of these can be found in, or some of these can be found in different plants, and so you can obtain all of them from different plants in your diet. And so typically the easiest way to get your essential amino acids from plant material is to combine a legume. So this is going to be like a bean, a peanut, or a soybean. Combine that with a grain, which is like wheat, corn, or rice. And that will get you all the essential amino acids that you need from diet. And so our example of combining a legume and grain for essential diet without protein or meat is here. And that's Middle Eastern staple food of the garbanzo beans and the hummus, and the picture on the right side of the picture, and then the grain, which is the pita. They get the essential amino acids in that meal from those two things. Another example for Americans would be a peanut butter sandwich. You get the grain, the wheat, and the bread, and then the legume, the peanut bean, and the peanut butter. And so there are many different ways, like rice and beans in the Central American culture naturally have found the dietary needs from plant material of essential amino acids. So let's look here at this figure. Diet consisting strictly of corn would probably result in deficiency of which amino acids? And so that would be the two that are found in beans but are not found in corn. That would be tryptophan and lysine. All right, so other nutritional needs are vitamins and minerals. Vitamin is defined as an organic molecule. You need this in small amounts in your diet. Most of them are going to be functioning as coenzymes. These are very important for enzymes functioning and ability to convert molecules to products. And so vitamins are essential, and these are organic molecules. Whereas the mineral is going to be inorganic. So this is going to be anything that's not carbon. So vitamin has carbon molecules in it. Minerals do not have carbon. So this would be like iron, magnesium, calcium. Minerals are going to be inorganic, required in small amounts, and they play a variety of roles as well. Let's see. And so some examples of vitamins and requirement in humans are here. Vitamin B, 1 through 12, vitamin C. And these are just interesting to look at, obviously not something to memorize. Compared to fat-soluble vitamins. So these vitamins will bond with fat molecules, vitamins A, D, E, and K, whereas vitamins B and C are water-soluble. So that's how they're further classified. And then minerals here, all from calcium to iodine, all of these are needed in small amounts. Let's see. So, not worry about that, or that, or that. All right, and so looking at our modern day food, most of our food from grocery stores will be packaged and produced for us by companies. And so looking at food labels is very helpful in providing nutritional information. So they will indicate a serving size of that package of food, calories per serving, amounts of nutrients per serving, as well as percent of daily value, and then recommendations for limits of those nutrients. And so some examples are shown here. And so this is part of your homework. One of your assignments is to look at looking at a food product in your pantry and trying to find something that might be a healthier replacement. And so here you can see the change in the food labeling has made certain images, different parts of the label larger to make it easier to read and understand. All right, and so a failure to obtain these essential nutrients in your diet can result in malnutrition, which is going to be a diet insufficient in nutrients or calories, and this can cause a lot of different health problems. And so the most common cause of malnutrition is protein deficiency. The not getting enough protein in the diet is going to cause most of the malnutrition in the world today. And so does malnutrition always result from lack of access to food? The answer to that is no. So there are some people out there that are able to obtain food but choose for whatever purposes, dietary preferences, psychological reasons to not take in food. And so there are a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of people suffering from different things like bulimia and anorexia that they have access to food, but they're malnourished because they choose not to ingest food as they need it. So here is an image of a child with a protein deficiency. And so with that protein deficiency, it causes a swelling of fluid in the abdominal cavity that produces a swollen belly that you see there. And so many people are, when they see these images, they get confused as to maybe why they would have a swollen belly if they're malnourished, and that's due to that protein deficiency. So looking at obesity, you might want to identify, well, how would you define obesity? How would you measure it? And there's a very common way is through body mass index, or BMI, which is looking at the ratio of weight to height of the person. And so it is useful in determining the amount, the overall status. We'll see that in the next image. But in terms of obesity itself, it's linked to a lack of exercise, usually partnered with the abundance of fattening foods, overconsumption. And so this may partly stem from the advantage, evolutionary speaking, of fat hoarding to have extra insulation on animals, extra fat. It can be seen as a benefit to keep you warmer during the winter, as well as better survival chances. If you, in terms of animals, they have a change of predation. They've lost their food source, or it's greatly reduced. They'll be able to survive longer without eating. And so it's partially fat hoarding is partially an evolutionary advantage that may have been taken a little too far in some humans. And so here we see the BMI calculation in terms of height to weight. And generally, this does help in terms of knowing where one would stand in this group. But I wouldn't personally take it too strict, as this is can be relative in terms of some people might be classified as overweight or underweight and actually be a healthy weight. And so this is helpful, but to an extent. I wouldn't rely on its exact science for good response or good answer. Overall, a healthy person has a decent diet and is exercising routinely and falls within a healthy fat to body ratio. In terms of studying why humans may have this problem with obesity, there are lots of different avenues, but one of them is through a hormone called leptin. Leptin is produced by fat cells and is known for suppressing appetite. And so there are certain people, very small percent of people that actually have a malfunction with leptin or a lack of leptin. Excuse me, and they don't have a way to suppress their appetite through the hormone. And so researchers have studied this hormone in different ways, and they looked at one with mice that inherit the defect in the gene and have become very obese. And so looking at that here, you can see the mouse on the left is the one with the leptin deficiency. And so the mouse on the right is the normal mouse. And so there's a big difference there. And so looking at leptin, when it drops, a drop in the leptin hormone concentration would, due to the loss of adipose tissue, would stimulate appetite, whereas a high level of leptin produced by a lot of fat tissue will decrease appetite. And so that second part there, where a high level of leptin produced by the fat tissue, a lot of fat tissue decreasing appetite, seems to not function in some people, and in this case, this mouse as well. And so obese children that have that mutant form of leptin will lose weight after treatments with leptin, but very few people actually have this deficiency. Other ways to examine nutrition and weight loss is through diets and looking at diets and populations with experiments. And so here you can see there are thousands upon thousands of diet studies out there, but in our book here we have a few that they look at the body mass index of adults and track their diet through self-reporting. And the results indicate that the more carbs consumed, the lower the risk of obesity. And so it seems to be backwards, but looking at the chart here, ranking by calories consumed, and then total calories per day, the percent overweight or obese there is higher in the bottom quartile than in the top quartile, and with the top quartile, they're consuming more calories per day, consuming more calories and overall, or carbohydrates, consuming more carbohydrates, and then the overall calories per day is lower. And so that's what indicates the calorie amount is more important than the carbohydrate there. Looking at some other ones here, they've studied in terms of diet type and then the weight lost. And so here, the weight lost after 2 years, a high protein diet versus low protein, they lost more weight in the high protein. For high fat, low fat, they lost more weight in the low fat diet. They lost more weight in the low carb diet. And so overall, the one that the high protein diet is a diet that results in the most amount of weight loss after 2 years. But it is significant to note that weight loss was recorded for all groups. Let's see. Oh, which is right here. They all lost a similar amount of weight. In terms of other things that can affect a diet would be cholesterol in your blood. So there are two types of cholesterol known as LDLs and HDLs. LDLs are going to be bad for your circulatory system. It's going to block blood vessels, have a high blood pressure, and increase chances of heart attack. Whereas HDLs are going to be better, is that they will convey excess cholesterol back to the liver where it's broken down. And so you want to have a high LDL percent with a low LDL. So overall, you can see most of the things between food, health, nutrition is very complex and not an easy way just to fix the obesity problem in the United States. But taking responsibility and trying to maintain your diet and your exercise is recommended for all adults, along with being able to lower the risk of cancer, which is shown here. So here are some guidelines for reducing cancer risk in terms of maintaining a healthy weight and diet throughout life. And then we have some foods shown here, vegetables, fruits that contribute to good health. Basically, anything green is usually going to help in terms of healthiness for humans. And so the rest here are the now should be able to's. And so in the next video, we'll take a look at the human digestive system and how it works. So until then, bye-bye for now.